Welcome to Mental Mages. We are Shayna and Kathy, just two therapists geeking out about pop culture and mental health.
Our discussions do not substitute for mental health treatment. We might be therapists, but we aren't your therapists.
Come on, let's go on an adventure. Welcome to Mental Mages. We are excited to talk about the rest of The Last of Us. A couple episodes ago, we talked about episodes 1 through 5. So today we are going to be talking about episodes 6 through 9. Right?
Yep.
Yes. Excellent.
Finishing the first season and the first game, right?
Yep.
So, spoiler alert for both of those mediums. We will talk about all of it. And probably like trigger warning for fungus and violence.
This is episodes Kin, Left Behind, When We Are in Need, and Look for the Light.
So when we last left, we have Ryan again. He's
Hi.
our guest.
Yes, I am here.
Oh my
again.
gosh, I can introduce him.
Okay.
Let me think.
Introduce him.
What are fun facts about Ryan? Okay. He really loves Critical Role.
Yeah.
Which we'll probably talk about again at some point today.
Yes.
Yes.
Will we?
Indeed.
Yeah.
We got
There's
good old.
two.
Oh, that's true. You're
Ash
right. Yes,
Johnson.
there's two cast members. You're absolutely right.
That's true. There are two.
Yep. Ryan tolerates our cats. Ryan loves our dog. Sometimes when he's talking to the dog, I think he's talking to me. Ryan likes pickles.
That's true.
Okay.
More than most.
Yeah, he really
Okay.
likes pickles. He has watched the Marvel movies more than a healthy person should.
I guess it depends on.
I don't know. So Ryan has been working on this project for years, where he's like putting all of the Marvel movies like in perfectly like. So he's cutting the movies to make a perfectly chronological, like
Scene by
sitting.
scene, yeah.
like scene by scene,
Chronological order. Yeah.
like splicing them and putting them together to make like the like 300-hour
Ultimate watch-a-thon.
Excellent.
if not longer. It's probably way longer than that, like 1,000 hours. I don't know.
I don't even know.
So we last left off episode 5. They had just left what is it, the Kansas City, is that where they were?
Kansas City, QZ.
QZ, and there was the scene with the lots of
The epic.
Yes, the
the
terrifying
epic
yes,
that I actually
the
learned
bloater.
about, that Jason Ritter had a cameo. He was one of the clickers, and that just came out this week, and that is the husband of what's her name, Melanie Linsky, who was the
Kathleen
leader. Yeah, Kathleen. So her real life husband was a clicker, and they're also super cute together, so I liked that little fun fact. Before we go into, so the next episode after that, it picks up 3 months after the events, and they're still making their way to Wyoming, trying to look for Joel's brother. And before we get into that, because it really starts off where they find a cabin with a couple that were in Northern Exposure. That was I loved that show when I watched it a lot in college, which was after the first run of it, but I really loved that show. So when they came on, I just had a moment. But we see Joel experience what appears to be panic attacks. So he was, holding it together when he was in front of the other people who could potentially be a threat. But as soon as they got out of that situation, there was a scene of him holding his chest and struggling to catch his breath. And it seems to be pretty evident that he's dealing with anxiety and panic right there, because he doesn't have it's not like it doesn't look like he has an ongoing cardiac issue. That's why I say that.
And panic attacks can mimic a heart attack to the point where people end up going
Yes.
to the emergency room. And
It's a really
people don't
common
realize.
reason
Yeah, yep. And
people
people don't
go to the
realize how
emergency room.
intense they can feel when you're having a panic attack. It can literally make you feel like you're dying.
Yes.
And they can
So I
be.
wanted to I want to talk more about panic attacks in a sec, but I wanted to go back to episode 5. Um, and I think really that seemed to be the turning point of when he started to really whatever happened to Ellie really mattered to him. And you see it when he was in the sniper position and felt completely terrified and didn't have control over what was happening. He was watching this all from above. And there was when you see the scenes of him as a sniper, you can see like small things like him shaking, like his hands shaking, which isn't something that, he would. I mean, Joel is like a cool character, he kind of doesn't really care about much of anything when we meet him 20 years beyond when he lost his daughter. And so that seems to be the first time that he really felt like he was going to lose something that mattered. And then we fast forward 3 months and he appears to be having a panic attack. So, Shane, I know you were talking about panic attacks. I don't know if you wanted to go a little further into that.
Sure. So panic attacks, I mean, they have a variety of symptoms. And it doesn't necessarily like include all of them all the time. But it mimics a heart attack. Um, so usually comes with loss of breath, so difficulty catching your breath. Usually, pounding heart can come with chest pains. Can come with um, tension and constricting muscles, um,
Dizziness,
dizziness,
a sense
seeing.
of dread.
And then almost seeing like blackness, ringing. There can be like ringing in your ears, sweating. There all kinds of different symptoms actually. Um, constricting throat,
Yep. And they
nausea.
can sometimes come out of nowhere. And so if someone has never experienced them before, it's extremely frightening. Um, and that is why it leads a lot of people to go to the emergency room, because it really does feel like they're having a serious medical event, which it is a serious mental health event, but it's not going to cause long-term physical damage.
Right. So it can be very frustrating for someone who goes in for a panic attack and is told it's just anxiety. And then they can feel very, very frustrated. But I remember honestly telling one of my friends who told me, well, it's just, I can't believe just stress and just anxiety is making me feel this way. And said, well, it's not just these things. That is a really serious thing. And it can make you feel really intense feelings and can cause a lot of pain. And tingling is another one. Tingling, numbness, really scary sensations that.
A lot of times too, people in a panic attack have um so I'm not going to get too much into dissociation because that's a pretty broad topic, but there's different types of dissociation that people have. One is called depersonalization, where it almost feels like you're not um in your body, or you're not yourself, or it just doesn't feel right. And that can go along with panic attacks as well. So a kind of dissociative feeling, which again can be very disorienting and scary. So, here Joel is experiencing these things. Um, there's not great medical care in post-apocalyptic world. Um, and also he's in the middle of nowhere. So I imagine it might lead to some of his continued fears of, well, what happens if something happens to him? What if he has a heart attack or something? And then Ellie's really on her own. So, Ryan, were there similar scenes like that in the video games?
There were not really. There's not a lot of focus on uh, Joel's emotions, besides the fact that you see his growing relationship with Ellie. But beyond that, you don't really see kind of, because in the show they made a lot of metaphors. Well, the analogy, with Ellie and Sarah. Um, there's that moment in the first episode where he's faced with the guy holding the gun up or whatever, trying to get to Ellie, and you saw a flashback of him going back to the instance where a gun was focused on Sarah. So they did a lot of those comparisons within the show. They didn't really do too much of that in the game. It was kind of more implied.
It was kind of cool to see like a grown man struggling with some of these things. Um, I think it really normalized it and showed that it's not just, it wouldn't just be the little, and it's interesting because actually Ellie almost tucks it away to a point where it's unhealthy, so she almost doesn't ever acknowledge anything that's going on.
Yeah, although I can't imagine that she had a whole lot of like social emotional
Sure.
instruction growing up. Um,
That was all she learned, was to just,
basically as
yeah,
a Fedra orphan.
yeah. It's
So,
gonna be interesting to see what she's like in the second season.
mhm.
I liked staying on this topic of his panic attacks later on in the same episode, episode 6. You see him come out of, I believe it's with his first conversation with Tommy in the bar. He comes out and he leans against a pole, a similar panic attack. And he sees a grown woman that looks a lot like Sarah. And you can just imagine what he's hopeful in that moment. Like, obviously
Right.
it's not Sarah, right? But what if it
And
was?
she has a child. So
And he's
what
seeing
if she
that,
had survived, and what if she had a child of her own, and
Mhm.
what if I was a grandfather right now? And Jackson, which is where his brother ended up, is first of all, they shot it in a very different way than they shot a lot of things. It felt bright. It was a lot of daytime shots. It felt safe. And maybe for him, and certainly for Ellie, well, she doesn't know safe other than, like, I think she knew safe as like Fedra, but he probably hadn't known any kind of feeling of safe for 20 years. And that probably feels really weird. So he meets his brother, and I don't know if I'm sure it did explain, but I don't remember how long they had been separated. Town, which is free, it's free from Vedra. Um, it is communal living. Maria was very clear that that's what was happening
We're
there, but it
communists.
worked. Yeah, it was communist. It was a commune. Um, that it worked well. Um, they had set up structure and a government and things like that
Got
you
electricity
know
and running water.
right.
They're doing something right.
Kids were playing, and
There were kids, and they were like
they were
young
kids.
kids. Hmm.
And so, this is also where we see the relationship between Joel and Ellie kind of come to a head, and where it really changes. So this is where they have essentially their confrontation, I guess, where they kind of tell each other how they feel a little bit. And this is something that happened directly in the video game, correct?
Yes. Such a great scene in the video game. Almost done word for word. One change they did make um, in the game, Ellie mentions, "I'm not Sarah," and Joel replies, "You're treading on mighty thin ice here."
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
And instead in the show they replaced that with "don't." They just made it so much more subtle and implied, which I think was cool.
I'm not her, you know. Maria told me about Sarah and...
No. Don't say another word.
And she also kind of he sees her as someone that has essentially not had any loss, and himself as someone who has experienced the greatest loss because of course he lost his daughter, um, and he lost Tess a little while ago. But she comes back at him and was like, "What are you talking about? I've lost everyone."
But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everybody I have cared for has either died or left me.
It's such a presumption, not like, but like it can be very presumptuous of adults to assume that children have never gone through anything, um, and say, "Oh, well, you shouldn't be tired. You shouldn't be this. You shouldn't be that. You're just a kid." But kids experience all kinds of stuff, and especially in an apocalypse, like they've experienced just as much. But it's something that I see a lot, working with children.
Work Shayna and I have done with children is a lot of times we will hear things like, well, they were just a kid or they were really young, and kids are really resilient. And that is true. Kids are resilient, but it doesn't mean that they're impervious. And resiliency just implies you go on. It doesn't imply that there's not some kind of impact. Um, and so whether you feel like a child was old enough to have a conscious memory of something, or that they seem okay, um, it doesn't mean that it hasn't impacted them. And so one of the things that we see sometimes with kids is how they process things like grief. So kids respond to grief very differently depending on, of course, their developmental age. But it's not atypical to see kids that are like informed someone close to them passed, or um, a pet or something like that, and they go, okay, and they like go back to what they're doing, and then seemingly out of the blue you'll have emotional outbursts, or then they'll process it and come back later and cry, or then they'll have nightmares, or act out at school, or seem just really sad like you would expect them to have been, and then they like switch again and go back. They don't necessarily have that same sustained um sadness that adults tend to have in grief. So it sometimes freaks adults out because they think that there's something wrong with their kiddo. They're not as sad as they should be. And it's like they're experiencing it. It's just they're experiencing differently than adults experience it.
And especially like little ones, it will impact, but it will not, because the concept of death or certain changes isn't, the permanency isn't understood. Yeah, so it might be a couple years for little ones to really understand, or really start to show that. And
Well, and one of the things with grief and trauma is you rework it in a psychological way at different developmental stages that you go through. So you've had grief or trauma at a younger age. When you go through a different developmental stage, you're going to rework it. It looks different than when you worked through it or came to terms with it before, but that's going to be one of the tasks that you do probably through the rest of your life. It may not be something that people see or you even talk about, but it ends up being something that is processed on some level. Maybe when you have a child yourself of the same age who went through something, when you were that age. That's really common too.
Going back to Joel, after his initial conversation with Tommy in the bar, he goes back later on and has this super emotional conversation with Tommy, which
Yes.
was, I mean, just very, mature of Joel's character. With his hard
Yes.
exterior, he was actually able to open up to his brother, and all of that. He had like a small conversation with Tommy in the game, but all of that deep emotional stuff was new to the show. And the whole
And I have dreams.
I'm having dreams.
What kind of dreams?
I'm just constantly failing in my sleep.
I just know that when I wake up, I've lost something. I'm failing in my sleep. It's all I've ever done. It's failure.
And some of it, I think, maybe goes back to Tommy may be the only other person who experienced the same loss with the death of Sarah that he did. So the only other person on the planet that could at least know where he's coming from with that.
I feel like Joel was trying to. He's already pretty darn connected to Ellie at this point, I think. But that was basically his last opportunity to wash his hands so that he doesn't get even further attached. And yeah, we know how that goes.
I also think that he was almost felt like, sometimes when we have experienced trauma or this, huge catastrophic thing, we start to really doubt our abilities and say, I'm not worthy of doing this. I'm really like, I'm not the good one, and making that choice of like, I'm not the right thing for you. And I think it was maybe a mixture of the two, but I actually genuinely think that he thought that he wasn't good enough. He wasn't in the place to be able to take care of her. And didn't want to fail another adolescent girl again.
Then we see his brother agrees to take Ellie to find the fireflies.
How
And
awkward,
then
right? Some other adult, like some random adult man is taking me on this journey, and now some other random adult man is taking me the rest of the way. Like, I just can't imagine like how weird that is.
so then of course we see that she's ticked off, and then when they go to leave, then Joel's in the stable because he couldn't leave, and also he wanted her, it felt like it was her choice to make, and she didn't even let him finish the sentence when she was like, all right, let's go. So he is her person at this point. I mean, they are each other's person. That's the scene where it just changes. It's undeniable at this point. So they go on and they go to Colorado, and where the fireflies supposedly were supposed to be, and nobody's there. And then we have a really awful moment where Joel is stabbed by a broken baseball bat trying to save Ellie. And now she's the one who's the protector and in charge.
Joel, open your eyes. Open your eyes. Joel, you gotta get up. Joel.
But before we can resolve that, we get a flashback episode.
That's right.
But it's also a flashback episode that's basically directly tied to what's happening.
Also
in our story
depressing.
today.
So we get to see Ellie's before.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Left Behind,
Ellie
aptly
just being-
named for the DLC called Left Behind.
What's a DLC? Tell us about what this is.
So after the first game was released, and its intense popularity, DLC is just released later on than the original game, usually purchasable DLC. So downloadable content is the acronym. So just more game, a shorter game, but more game. So the Left Behind was the DLC for the first game, where it goes through the same story as we see in the episode.
Okay. So we see Ellie when she is at the Fedra Military School, where basically she was raised. She didn't really get along with her peers. They made fun of her, bullied her. She's got her fight, and so
Even in the apocalypse, middle school adolescent girls are still jerks.
And they get to the first wonder of them all, the
The
escalator.
first wonder.
Escalators are pretty cool. So
and scary.
Yeah, I hate escalators.
I still get a little twinge of anxiety at the last minute if I'm going to step off on time.
you get sucked into it. Yeah.
No, I get worried
Every
about
single
stepping
time I step
on.
off on time, but
I get worried about stepping on because, like, what if I trip? Those edges are sharp as crap, and then I'll take everyone down with me. Like, it would be awful.
This is just a taste of what it's like living with an anxiety disorder.
Yes.
Hearing Shayna and I talk about escalators.
Sometimes I hesitate. It takes me like 3 steps, and Ryan will be like, "Just go. Just get on the
But what if I tumble down
Yes.
and kill everyone on the way? So essentially, I was very impressed with her bravery for just jumping right on that thing when she's never experienced one before. So she went on the escalator, not elevator. What else? What else she did? What was set up
We
down there?
went to just the
They did the
carousel.
carousel.
They go at the carousel, a photo booth,
Yes.
which was really cute.
So I know I actually haven't played the DLC yet, but I know the photo booth is an iconic scene in there. If I remember right, from what I've heard, I think the show did it pretty faithfully to that expansion.
And they did an arcade, I think, right?
Oh yes, they did an arcade. And these are really like every kid's fantasy because the coin machine was broken open, and so they could play an unlimited amount of video games.
We get to see some Mortal Kombat 2,
Yes.
Yes.
which I think was episode 2 or 3. Ellie and Joel were traveling, and she found one, and she was just reminiscing, and we got to see the origin of that reminiscence.
So
We get to
they
see
do that.
Melina swallowing somebody up and barfing out bones.
Exactly.
Yep.
So they really have this like this really kind of a magical, it ends up kind of being a first date for them. There's a change in their relationship, but then at the end Riley tells her she's leaving. So she came together because she's leaving and she's going to the Atlanta area with fireflies.
And Ellie storms off, but then it gets worried about her after the fact, goes back, hears screams, runs to the origin, and sees that it's a Halloween shop and it's a prop, and she's fine.
And she's fine. And then it's another wonder of them all.
Yep.
And they have fun in there, and they do a dance party on the counters, and kind of realize they're into each other, not just as friends.
Yeah. It's very sweet and innocent.
Yeah, very middle school, like adolescent
Like early high
girl.
school. Mm-hmm.
Like,
And
oh,
in
this
that
is different.
in that moment, I love Bella's acting, where she has the wolf mask still on, but you see her start to kind of slow down, and I feel like you can just tell exactly what she's thinking without even seeing her face. It's just very
Yeah,
impressive, her
just
acting.
the body language.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, whoa, I like this girl. And then, of course, because
No one's
this
allowed.
show,
Yeah, no one's allowed to be happy in this show.
no, then a clicker comes running out after them and bites both of them. So then they think they're going to die together. And I guess if you're going to die, you might as well die with your person.
Be all poetic and lose our minds together.
Yes.
But then it led to poor Ellie having to kill her best friend slash.
Yep. And that's
First
how she
crush.
learns she's immune.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she doesn't get to just turn. So
Yeah,
she
because
has.
I think Riley was bitten in the thumb area, and Ellie was bitten in the arm. So theoretically, Ellie should have gone first.
Oh, is that how it works?
Yeah, the
To your
closer it is
brain?
to the brain, the faster it is. Because I think they said early on, if you get bitten like the foot, it takes like a day or two.
Oh, wow.
That could be wrong, but it's something
Is it
like
like
that.
The Walking Dead where they can like amputate the foot and like
I don't
stop
know.
it?
I don't know.
So then after that, and you see essentially what, she was kind of confronting Joel about in the previous episode of like, yeah, I've lost people too. It's not all about you, Joel.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to her, he is completely like next to death, and
Mm-hmm.
she finds a house, puts him in it, and then is trying to find food and water and
Yeah, and
knows.
he's at the point where he's like, just leave me.
Just leave.
I'm not going to make it, and she refuses.
Leave.
Shut up, Joel.
Take the gun. Go. You go. Go.
I have an excellent story about this part of the game.
Okay, let's hear it.
So at this part of the game, the person takes over Ellie. And I would just like the world to know I helped Ryan solve this video game puzzle. Because
If you can call it a puzzle. It was just me
Listen.
being dumb.
exactly. Ryan's like, you have to follow like the deer and keep shoot it, and he thought like, man, this deer just like won't die. Like, what is wrong with this deer? Like, I've shot it like so many times. And then I was like, is it trying to lead you somewhere?
Ah,
I know.
so Shayna won the game because without that, you would not have beaten the game.
So we're at the beginning of episode 8 in that scenario where she goes out and hunts the deer to bring back for her and Joel. At this point, she's already found stitches in the home and starting to stitch him up. Now he's just resting. But that's where we find a new character.
Oh,
This episode is awful.
Episode
I
8,
agree.
When We Are in Need. It starts actually off with this new character,
David.
dictating a speech to his group about God and our purpose in this world, all that stuff.
Just like the world to know that not all Christians are crazy.
Well, I think it was pretty well established that he wasn't actually a Christian.
No, he was pretty
No,
horrible.
he was using Christianity as justification for his
Yeah,
actions.
he was a cult
Sure.
leader,
Yeah.
and a narcissist and
Many
all
other
of the above.
horrifying
Just a
things.
horrible person. So yes, it shows which is an interesting kind of, so his group of people, they had also set up a community, a commune, if you will, that also had things like a movie theater and a dining hall and all of these things that in a way mirror Jackson where Tommy is, but it just feels different.
The antithesis of it.
You just feel like
Yes.
this kind of tension.
Yes. Doesn't feel great there. So yes, we meet him, and then fun fact is his kind of right-hand man, James,
Troy Baker.
is the voice of Joel in the video games.
That's right. When Ellie meets David and James, you actually kind of get that David might be a decent guy. He says to James, "Go get the meds for her, so we can get some of this deer and let her go out." And I love where James just kind of looks at him confusedly, and he's just like, "This is not code, James. Go get the meds." I love that part.
Exactly.
It's not code, James. Do as I said.
And it goes away pretty quickly. They have a little conversation where David says to Ellie, everything happens for a reason. You show up here while, just a bit ago, we had someone kill one of our people, and that person happened to be traveling with a young girl like you.
Cue the pit in your stomach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Turns out he was murdered by this crazy man. That crazy man was traveling with a little girl. You see? Everything happens for a reason.
One thing I get why they did it, but something that happens in the game is you get that trust even built more before he betrays you. So like you actually go to kill some zombies with him as an ally because they overrun wherever they are, the sawmill. I think it's a sawmill, maybe, I don't know. And you actually have to kill another bloater, the one we saw in episode 5, the big dude. And everything, and then that conversation happens. So I wish I wish in the show, it built that trust a little more, like it did in the game, just to be ultimately betrayed still. But I know that they didn't want their reasoning was that they didn't want to put the infected over in this area, because then that just creates more problems. Like, why aren't they invading, their settlement? You know, we've just been getting less and less infected over the course of the show, which is kind of funny. It's really focused on the humanity of it.
Yeah. Which is why, the episodes like episode 7 and episode 3 that are very um person centered and kind of flashbacks, but really don't have any infected at all. Um uh, I would say not most, but there's definitely a sizable portion of fans that kind of push back on those of like, get back to the real story. And it's like, this is the real story. This is, I mean, people, this is the interesting part of it. Of course, like the infected are part of it and it moves things along, but it's all about how people interact with each other. So, um, so yeah, in this exchange, then it's become pretty clear that they're like, "Hey, we know your buddy Joel killed our guy, and we're not happy about that. So we're gonna, eye for an eye kind of thing. I'm gonna take care of Joel."
And at this point, David is being very forthright with Ellie. Like, I don't think at any point in this episode that he lies to Ellie, which is
No, I
an
think that's
interesting
probably
part of it.
true. Yeah,
Like I believe he is very truthful when he says, "We're not going to hurt you. We're going to hurt your friend, but we're not going to hurt you."
and then he comes with a party to come and basically go house by house to try to find Joel.
And then Ellie sees that and runs a different direction to try to lead them away. And that's when she gets taken by James, who shoots her poor horse.
Oh
That
yeah,
horse
that's
didn't
so
do
sad.
anything wrong.
But thankfully, Joel has like the fastest acting penicillin ever. It's like a
Penicillin
super
and
serum.
adrenaline comes together to create a
Yeah,
super
it's got to be
soldier.
that natural adrenaline kicked in, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
no,
I
it's
guess,
pretty
yeah.
great.
And then he becomes a killing machine that we had heard reference to. So yeah, so he goes John Wick, and she's taken back to David's camp and locked in a cage in the kitchen. And the next few scenes are ones that, like, she's she's grown up in trauma and some amount of terror. It's mostly been terror of the infected. Um, but she probably for the first time is really horrified and traumatized by what humans can do, because she finds out they're eating people. So, and it seems like also that they might kind of like it, or they're definitely good at it. They've got bodies dressed like it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel like as much survival as, I mean, it is survival, but it doesn't seem like you had to twist their arm too much.
Yeah, but she also goes pretty freaking
Yeah.
awesomely cool and breaks his fingers and
Even afraid as she might be, she still is feisty as ever.
Yeah. I mean, and in that scene, he is telling her some more truths, and some of the truths that he sees in her, which is not wrong, which is her own capability of violence, which isn't necessarily surprising to us given her feistiness, but she's never been forced to, especially not on people, to kind of act on this in a way. Um, and he is trying to entice her, I guess, to become his partner. I also think James's death scene was pretty good, and
yeah, it was.
I mean, she does hack him in the neck, and then she does burn him, and that was, yeah,
And
burns
he
the
just
place
like doesn't
down.
even care about the place burning down, which I thought was just an extra little ping of wow, this guy is really horrific.
Yeah, yeah. And then she runs out, and and Joel is there, and she's in a pure like fight or flight mode. She's in the flight part of it. She'd done the fight, and now she's running for her life.
The part that killed me,
Oh,
baby
when
girl,
Joel, yes. So
when he
Joel
calls her baby
grabs
girl.
her, calls her baby girl, and just, embraces her.
I know, baby. No, I know. Come on, baby girl, I gotta get you up. Come on, get up. Come on, baby girl.
It's okay, baby girl.
Yes. Yeah. That was yeah. So then we pick up on the last episode, and
Before we do that, I wanted to
yes.
see what y'all's opinion was when you saw that side of Joel for the first time, specifically when he's interrogating those two people on where Ellie might be. He goes up to one guy and yells at him, obviously, where is she or whatever, and then proceeds to stab him in the kneecap.
So
This level of rage.
two things. One is it's unfair in a lot of ways that it's Pedro Pascal, because I feel like he could anything he does and you're still like, it's justified. But I also think, what you know about him at the beginning of when we meet him is he's a dad, and then now he's fighting for his adopted daughter, essentially. Um and as a parent, it's hard to imagine that there's a line that you wouldn't cross to protect your kid.
And then I just love this actually scene in the game and the show, just the visualize his rage once something he loves is taken from him. He kills that first guy once he's gotten an answer, hoping to corroborate it with that second guy. He's like, "I'm not telling you anything," and I just love that line. Joel says, "It's okay, I believe him," and just kills him too. Just crazy.
It's okay.
No.
I believe him.
No.
Yes. But I and some of it is, I mean, obviously there is that kind of detachment of, you're watching a show and it's not real, and he's not really killing these people, because I've watched enough horror movies to feel like, don't trust anybody. So like, yeah, you better make sure that they're dead, because they're just going to turn on you later. They're in a cult. They're not going to just like be like, oh, okay, we'll let you go. No, like, they're protecting their people too, so they're not going to, if you give them any wiggle room, they're gonna use that against you. Which, if you look at it in real life, that's horrific. That would be horrible to be in that position. But we're not. We're watching a post-apocalyptic nightmare. So when we start episode 9, it picks up some time later. It's the spring now. They were in a very wintry winter in the previous episode where everything was cold, and now there's springtime and flowers and stuff. And two things I noticed immediately was there is a heaviness to Ellie that wasn't there before, which seemed pretty clearly to me it was related to the trauma that she experienced at the hands of David. And there's a lightness to Joel that wasn't there before.
I love that role reversal, like from the beginning of the season till now. It
And then
just
he's trying to cheer her up with like the jokes and
Yep.
and
Ellie being so open at the beginning, with Joel being closed off, and now it's just the complete opposite right here, because of Ellie's immediate trauma, right?
And again, I like that it demonstrated it wasn't necessarily like she wasn't crying, she wasn't, it was more she was very distracted.
Yes.
And that's a really typical response of, it would almost be like talking to a wall, and she would be like, huh, what? And that's
which
very
is, it's
typical
worth
for kids.
pointing out that, and we probably talked about this before, but inattention can be a huge part of trauma response. And it's also one of the reasons, especially in children, that they sometimes are misdiagnosed as having ADHD. So yeah, so that's where we are. And they find a giraffe.
Who was
Iconic
real.
scene.
Yes. You get a moment of the childlike Ellie again, the light Ellie, where she's laughing as she's feeding this giraffe. Like, it's just a really kind of pure moment.
I love Joel just smiling as she's doing that, just in the
Yeah.
background, just looking at her.
Giraffes are very shy, though. So in real life, this giraffe would not. Like, this was a giraffe that was used to people.
So I have a fun fact, like, in my memories from probably 3 or 4 years ago. I took my kiddo to the zoo, and I didn't tell her at the time, but we had a don't say no day. So I didn't tell her that's what I was doing, but anything she wanted to do, I let her do. And so we had a few animal encounters, and one of them was feeding the giraffe at the zoo. And as I was walking up to the giraffe area, there was a little stand there with someone who was selling things. And Shayna was that person who was selling things on that day.
Oh
Yes,
my
I'm
god.
pretty familiar with giraffes. So,
Yes.
and ours, like I still work there. No, I loved them. So I would feed, I would sell the food, and oftentimes, like there was one giraffe that never, ever, ever let people feed him because he had a traumatic
Randall.
experience. No, that's
Oh, that was a
Randall
guess.
was like Phantom, like he's just wishy washy. Sometimes he liked it, sometimes he didn't. But giraffes, like I've decided, are just giant cats.
I believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you could tell this giraffe was like pretty friendly. Like this
Yeah,
was
it
a
was from a
giraffe
zoo.
that was used to, yeah, which is typical. And maybe wild giraffe would come up to. I actually have no idea.
Yeah, I was about to
Um,
say. I mean, he hasn't probably seen anyone for 20 years. So
and if you're gonna feed him, you're gonna. I mean, hey, but I mean, if there was a whole group of giraffe like that, they were probably from a zoo. They
Well,
weren't
but
just.
20 years before. And then
so
they
now
had
they're wild.
babies. So,
That's
yeah.
true. That's true.
But they obviously like didn't necessarily have any predators in that area.
Right.
So would not have
And
had.
giraffes don't really have because they're huge.
Oh wait,
Yeah.
what are we doing, y'all? We skipped past the flashback.
What flashback?
Ellie's mother gave us birth.
Oh, you're right.
Ashley Johnson. We can't
How
forget
did we do
Ashley
that?
Johnson.
Oh my
That's
goodness,
true.
from Critical
Part
Role.
one of the Critical Role reference train of this episode of the podcast here.
She
Ashley
created
Johnson.
Ellie in both settings. She was the voice, and she
That's
gave
right.
birth to her in the show.
hmm
Yes.
And not, I mean, she wasn't just the voice. The game was motion capture, so she literally
Mm.
acted, and a lot of that, some of these lines in the game, came from her and Troy, improvising in the moment. It's a fully acted role, and she did beautiful in the game. She did beautiful as Anna, the mother.
And you really see, again, because they did the motion capture with her, obviously Ellie in the game resembled her, and you really, in those scenes especially, could really see how she looked so much like there's some resemblance between her and Bella.
Yeah, they did a good job because sometimes, like I thought, because Ashley Johnson has very distinct features, and I actually think
Mhm.
Bella they captured some of that, like long face.
So yeah, so it shows how Ellie is born, and then also presumably how Ellie becomes uh immune.
That's right.
Also, it shows what is her name? Oh my God, Marion,
Marlene.
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 It shows Marlene having to make a really horrible choice, similar to what Ellie had to do.
And just as another fun fact, the actress who plays Marlene, Merle Dandridge, also played Marlene in the video games.
hmm
I love that they really like married the two.
Paid homage for sure.
Yeah, and included it like everybody. I just think that's really awesome.
Yeah, one of the creators of the show was the creator of the game, so I'm
Mhm.
glad that he signed on to this show fully and was able to be there for everything. I think that really helps.
They get knocked out, and when Joel wakes up, he is told that Ellie is being prepped for surgery by Marlene, and learns that in order for them to harvest the cordyceps and make an antidote. So we find out that essentially she's been living, and I thought this was pretty interesting. So because her mom was bitten right before Ellie was given birth, was birthed, yeah, the cordyceps entered her bloodstream But because the umbilical cord was cut so quickly, they grew with her, essentially, is kind of the theory, that they attached to her brain and have just kind of been present, and they didn't realize the cordyceps haven't eaten her. I read an article that was a lot more eloquent than what I just said. Because I needed to understand it in my own brain. And so I read a really good article that I can attach.
Yeah, so the chemical messengers of the cordyceps were in her brain, telling
Yes.
cordyceps that it
Yes.
exists, so you don't have to spread,
Right.
right? Um, so she could be bitten and it won't grow because it's already there, but it's not.
So,
So,
but basically in that moment, because I think he was probably under the impression that they just needed her blood.
right.
Yeah.
And then we find out, no, they need her brain.
Hmm. And that
And
she
she
will
is
die from this surgery.
And the
exactly.
article I read was interesting because it was saying that they should have explained it a little bit better, because us that aren't scientists are like, well, why can't they just, because, even brain surgery, you detach things. But it's also a post apocalyptic world. We don't necessarily have a brain surgeon on staff.
Right.
But it's kind of
Yeah,
like,
that
why
surgical suite
couldn't,
was kind of dirty.
yeah, why couldn't you do this? And so they could have maybe possibly spent a little, apparently in the game, they spent actually a little bit more time on that.
Yeah, I think I forgot some of this actually because I didn't remember it. Apparently, it's shown in the first game. I didn't remember why Ellie was immune, but I do remember this last sequence being actually a bunch of voice recordings that you just find of Marlene kind of talking about this thing.
That's creepy. It's a different kind of creepy. Um, and so then he's faced with the choice that's, this huge dilemma that comes up in a lot of things of, do you sacrifice the one to save the many?
Wasn't much of a dilemma for him.
Yeah, he just
No.
immediately acted.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly went into Beast Joel mode.
Hmm.
And he completely dissociates. If you just look at his
Yes.
face through that whole sequence, there's no change in emotion. He
Nothing.
just
There was no
points his gun,
shaking.
shoots, points his
No
gun,
shaking
shoots.
like he was in episode 5.
Yep.
Um,
Just it needed to be done, so we did it.
yep. Everything
That's
was
fine.
muted. The
Mhm.
sound was muted.
Yes.
Which it was an important choice, and not, but it also was important because I think it does also show that dissociation of what he was experiencing. You are seeing that from his perspective. And seeing him I know it was probably like this in the video game too, like how he would take the gun of the person that he killed. That's how you like replenish your ammo, but
Yep.
also like how many movies do we watch where you yell at the screen, take that gun?
Yeah.
And he actually did. So
I think it's interesting. So the same article that I was reading was talking about how, in the video game, it's a different perspective because you are Joel in the game, so you are forced to make this choice whether you agree with it or not, and play it out. You can't choose an alternative within the game, and I just thought that was really interesting. That this horrible, because it is horrible. It is ultimately it is really terrible. Um, and it's also difficult because we know how brave Ellie is and we know what she would want to do. Um,
but at the end of the day, no one asked her anyway.
no one did, no, and that sucks.
Yeah.
The whole thing really sucks, and it's almost like, yeah, it's one of those things that there's not ever going to be the right answer or good answer. Um, but the whole thing is horrifying, and the player is literally forced to do this.
And I can see, like, I knew going into it, you hear the things like the finale is really going to split the fan base and some people are going to be really upset. And I was not, I didn't, maybe still don't have an opinion about it. And in a way, because some of it is probably being a therapist, about being able to compartmentalize things that are difficult. So it's like you just put that away. And then the other piece of it is really being able to be like, I don't know what I would do in a situation in the post-apocalyptic world where I was a badass who could, save my daughter's life. I don't know what I would do.
To finish the episode off, though, Joel comes into the surgical suite, kills the doctor that puts up a knife instantly, and we see a second Critical Role reference. Laura
Yes.
Bailey, even more of a cameo, as
Yes.
one of the nurses, doctors. But Joel picks up Ellie, goes down the elevator, is faced with Marlene, who's holding a gun, and she kind of explains her situation, her side, but he doesn't care. Shoots her, and then proceeds to lie to Ellie about the situation,
The
which
lying
is
was
part
rough.
two. Part two of the conflict. One, the
Yes.
decision that he made ultimately, right, to
Yes.
save Ellie. Part two, the lying of
Lying.
it. You know.
And not only did he lie, he like lied. He's like, "Oh, there were a bunch of you, and it wasn't gonna work," and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Like,
Yeah, he had to make it convincing. I mean,
yeah,
for Ellie to believe it, but
they took your blood, it just didn't work.
Right.
Like you could have been a little softer, but no, he like legit lied, and it was, yeah,
Yeah.
and so they continue driving. They get out of the car, start walking, and then this is when Ellie finally confronts him about the situation.
Swear to me.
Swear to me that you didn't lie about the
Swear to
fireflies.
me that everything you said about the fireflies is true.
And he says, "I swear."
I swear.
and that frustrates me too because
And
it's
it
again,
ends.
it's like, and I actually really like that ending, but
She says,
Okay.
"Okay," and then
Yeah, that's
credits.
right. And then it ends.
But again, it's this thing that I feel like he has now decided she's a child, and
She's
I'm
his child.
correct, and I'm going to protect her, and this is how I'm choosing to protect her, and it's not giving her a choice, um, which is frustrating. And I'd say actually that frustrates me more than him like saving her in a way. It's like at least tell her. Um,
And it's kind of anti how he treated her before
exactly.
he cared about her or
Mm-hmm.
admitted that he cared about her.
What do you think of the okay? What do you think
Oh,
that
I think
means?
she doesn't believe him.
Oh yeah, she's so smart.
Or yeah, she's I mean, she has spent so long now with him one on one that she's gonna know. She knows something's off. She may not know what is off, but she knows something is off.
Yeah, like she wouldn't have woken up like asleep in his car.
Mhm.
She's not stupid.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. I mean, yes, there's when they have this exchange, they are standing over, they can see Jackson, where is the closest thing to like a really like normal, safe, nice place to be. And the thought of having a sheep ranch or whatever and is right there. But e- essentially it's the two of them. So if you had one person in your life that you depended on for everything and was really the only person you knew you trusted or you had been through all of these situations with, um do you really have an option but to be like to just go in as optimistically as you can until something proves different?
Yeah. You might have to just, I mean, yeah, like she's gonna suddenly hate the person that was the most, like the
Right.
center of her universe, essentially,
And where's she gonna go? She gonna run away to another town? Like, that's not been great. The only place she could go that's safe is where he's going with his brother. I mean, the last settlement they found had David in it.
And by the way, that was done word for word on the game. At least those final 3 lines. Just the okay end.
Swear to me that everything that you've said about the fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
I was thinking about it, and so I actually really love, like, if there was no second season, I'd be still fine with that ending. I
Yeah,
don't necessarily need resolution, like that's enough resolution to me. But I know some people like would flip their lid, but I actually like, I'm
yeah, I'm
good.
okay with it too.
Mm-hmm. I'm content. People can kind of make what they want out of it. Um,
Well, and I mean that's kind of how life is. Like,
exactly. There's no resolution. Like
there's
there's never
always something after the happily ever after.
exactly.
It's usually pretty messy.
I love an
anyway.
ending that's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Makes for interesting conversation.
Okay, so we have our side quest. Shayna, what you been into?
I did finish. So I finished the Lux series, and I finished A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'm currently finishing a series called like The Uglies by Scott Westerfield. They're pretty fun, silly sci-fi YA books. I like detoured to something totally different because I'm very eclectic in my reading, and so I read or listened to An Old-Fashioned Girl by Louisa May Alcott, and that was really cute. Like I'm watching Steven Universe on repeat because that's who I am.
How many times now?
I don't know.
There's no number.
Oh, okay.
It's my like wind down show.
Ryan, what have you been into? Marvel movies?
Of course, we watched we went to theaters for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
That was
recently.
really good.
That was really good. I don't know, what am I doing? I watched this great show recently called The Last of Us. It was very good.
We're watching Critical Role.
I mean, yeah, I'm always watching Critical Role though.
I know.
Yeah, catching up on Critical Role. Apparently some crazy crap's going down, like current time. We're like a few episodes behind, so I need to catch up. Well, so Critical Role, you got a mountain to climb.
Well, yeah, it's a little daunting.
Good 1,000 hours probably.
Yeah, that's a lot.
See,
So,
Steven Universe is only like, I don't know, 6.
You can start with Campaign 2. That one's easier to get into than the first one.
Okay, I can probably do that. We binged. This was one that, I sometimes show names I keep forgetting, but I think it's Shadow and Bone. I'm like, is it Blood and Ice and Blood and Fire? No, it's Shadow and Bone. So we watched the entire season 2 yesterday of that. So that was good. And we're watching The Mandalorian. And that's our family show.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that yet.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, it was fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mental Mages. Editing is by Ryan Merrill. Artwork by Matthew Gwaltney. Intro music is Call to Adventure by Kevin MacLeod. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license.
For more information on our podcast, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Mental Mages Podcast. Well, it's time for us to go take a long rest. Until next time, adventurers.
Oh my god. What do you think, Phantom? House of the Dragon, I think, is 2025, right?
Oh my goodness.
Something ridiculous. Or maybe it was the end of 2024.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Or
That's
something like that, right?
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
They pumped out Twilight movies in like 6 months. Come on.
Okay, well, let's be honest. House of the Dragon is a little bit higher quality than Twilight. Just a bit.
Fair.